It's Monday, so of course we want to know.
We want to know all the things. Happy
Really?
Monday.
Hello.
Good morning. Welcome to the latest episode of the Project Failure Files, the series for anyone who manages people, projects, processes for a living. I am Sharon Weaver, CEO of Smarter Consulting.
And I am Christian Buckley, founder of Collab Talk, and welcome to another episode of our series where Sharon and I explore management and leadership topics from the perspective of what not to do. There's my what not to do. All right.
So on this episode, we are going to be talking about taking the time to review your approach of whatever it is that you're working on and make the necessary adjustments. So what are you doing? What's working? What's not working? And what do you need to change?
You know, we were talking about change management last week. We're diving into something more granular. So this is one of the, and I made this comment last week, one of the most important aspects of any project, and one that does not get enough time or attention is the project postmortem, the retrospective. Yeah.
Also, AKA postmortem, retrospective, lesson learned, audit, review,
Yep.
All kinds of different synonyms for the same thing. Most importantly, I agree. It is a key moment for every project or initiative or thing that you're trying to accomplish, but definitely not the only opportunity to review and learn things individually as a team or as a company. If you look at planning cycles for large companies around the world, they always build this kind of analysis into the annual planning cycle. It's an integral part of continuous improvement, the lean methodology. Every major company on the planet knows this.
Anytime you could look at a project, you could look at the way a team works. You can and pause things and say, "All right, let's go back. Let's stop and look at, is this working?" You can do that at any time. For many organizations where they're looking at kind of where it's built into their planning process, it could be an annual thing, but that may not be frequent enough for the amount of change, depending on the area that you're in. We're in consulting and tech consulting. Like there's too much that's going on. It's too quick. We're making adjustments throughout the year. I used to do, I think Sharon, you did the same thing where at the start of the year going into it, I'd look at what announcements, the technology out there, and I would create abstracts for the various topics that I was really passionate about, that I wanted to talk on at conferences over the course of the year. And I would create them kind of once, and I would add a couple things or make adjustments to all of the topics over the course of the year, but really that once a year. Now, like that's not enough. On a regular basis, I'm in there swapping things out, changing things up, adding new topics because there's so much new that's happening. So that pace of change around AI, for example, if AI is part of your strategy, you need to be looking at the evolution of your industry, your approach, your employee needs on at least a monthly basis. There's so much that's happening and changing rapidly.
I feel like the technology industry is a little bit like the diner special board right now. It's like, hang on a sec, let me see what's on special today. Yeah, we can talk about that.
Don't make the mistake of using the permanent pen on the pen board. That's right. Yeah.
Well, I think there's plenty to talk about today. I do want to clarify, when we say we're going to talk about the retrospective, the lessons learned, the postmortem, we mean the formalized approach to making sure that you're reviewing the things you need to change. And if you say in our comments, it's okay, guys, we check that, you're probably exactly who we're talking to.
Yeah. Look, you're right. I mean, it could be something that you informally go and do. I think part of the point of us talking about this is that I would venture a guess that you're not doing enough with it. You're not giving it the proper attention. That's why we're focusing on this. It is part of the broader change management discussion, which kind of fits into most of the topics that we discuss in this series, but should be a great conversation as always. And as with every episode, please feel free to comment throughout the episode, share your experiences, any examples that you have, life learned lessons, things, any feedback, that something that we may have missed. So we'd love to hear from you.
The more outrageous, the better, guys. Bring them on.
Yes.
Come on. We need to start having a competition. I want to see how crazy those stories can get.
Failure files. That's why we want to hear the failure stories. And then what did you learn from the failures?
We need an award, Christian. We need an award for the most outrageous failure file.
There we go. I know. I agreed.
All right. So for today, let's get started with some definitions.
So when I think of postmortem, retrospective, so it's what they are. They're supposed to be like, okay, here's what happened, the result, because you have a postmortem on a very successful project. Why was it successful? Start going and looking at the components of, do we have the right people? Do we have the right budget? There's the timeline, like all the things. What went wrong? I think the first mistake that's made is that it overly focuses on everything that went wrong without talking about what went right. And so it's not meant to be a gang up and beat up on the people that worked on the project and all the failures there, but to look at a balance of what went right, what went wrong. We followed the process. Here's where we went away from the process. Was that something that's positive or negative? Does that mean that some of the process needs to change? The way that we scoped it, how close were we to the scope and the hour and the budget, the people, the resources, kind of all those different things. And then what can we do to improve?
Yeah, I know we're not on the talking about personal stories yet, but I'm going to use this as part of the definition because I got the really cool opportunity many, many years ago to work on it was a lesson learned inception project is what it was. And I call it inception because it was an initiative to identify the lessons learned that we were doing on projects. And we did an entire project to make our lesson learned process better, which I think was really cool. And I think it is really important from a definition perspective to identify this is the formal step of understanding exactly like what you just said. What did you do? Where did you change? What did you plan on? What did you do? And where are the things that you had to adjust or change, or they didn't quite go the way you expected, so that you understand in future projects, will I need to make this change? Will I need to make an adjustment? Will I need to fix something? Because if we can proactively do that for every other project, we will eliminate waste, right? And we will be able to be more successful at the project list. This is the formalized plan of knowing what you're doing right and wrong in that part of the project.
One of the things that you need to go and have a retrospective on is your process for retrospectives. So when you say like formalizing that again, like what are the list of questions? What are you moving through so that you have data that you can see? Okay, we keep mentioning, and this is from experience as well. We keep talking about something in our process needs to be changed, but why didn't we change it the last time we did a retrospective and talked about that?
And that's the biggest risk, right? Is because then you just keep making the same mistakes over and over and over, and you're wasting time talking about the fact that you made the same mistake over and over, which means now you're wasting the same time over and over to talk about the mistake that you made over and over.
Right. Over and over.
Over and over. Again and again.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. Why, and I learned in an unhealthy environment how not to run a postmortem. When I learned the terminology, and it's why a lot of teams avoid it, is because it turned into a blame game. It looked like a big wasted time. Hey, we have to go and do this thing. So culturally, there was failure in the way that they used this process. It wasn't really learning. It was more of a beat up on the PM and the people that were doing the tasks. And so it just was an overly negative thing. Over my career, it became a very positive thing. You have to have the tough discussions sometimes, but if you do it as a balance, and if you do it where it's structured, it's not just a checklist of, hey, we asked this, but going through that process and following up on, assigned tasks out of that. Hey, we're going to make this modification. We're going to make this adjustment here. It could be that your communication strategy changes. It could be that you have secondary review on budget and timeline before the SOW gets finalized. So it could change part of the sales process. There's so much that could come out of that. It has to be actionable, I guess is what I'm trying to say. There has to be like, what are we actually doing? Or if it went perfect, everything was perfect with the new model,
then we know something's wrong.
Yeah,
we know somebody's lying, and we
that's
know
the first red flag. I know. No
Nothing
more alcohol in the meeting room.
No, nothing. I've been doing this for 30 years. I've never seen a project go perfectly. And anytime, it almost kind of bothers me when I get on enough meetings where I say, do you need anything? Or when I say, what went wrong? Oh, nothing, everything. No, that's not a real thing. So
this idea of this intentional reflection, forcing people to look in the mirror around us. But again, it's an important cultural difference. Organizations that that have that. I know that there's what is it? The book, the radical candor.
Yes.
To be able to have the tough discussions and things that are out there and ask questions, be there. Like this is part of that. Are you really able to ask the tough questions if you don't have this kind of intentional reflection at the project and have it this balanced discussion?
Yeah, I think it tells you a lot about a culture too. If you sit on a retrospective or any sort of a post project conversation, I think the more time, energy, and openness that you hear from that team about what went right, what went wrong, what they changed, what they would change, I think it really speaks volumes to the culture itself. And I think the more that you allow that to happen and encourage, not just allow, but encourage that to happen, the more you're encouraging accountability and growth within your team to be able to do what they need to do.
Yeah. I think healthy family relationships is a great way to think about this too, is that if children, spouse are afraid to ask questions or speak their mind and be open about that, if you can't talk about basic things within the family, I mean, that can cause damage to psychological safety. It discourages open dialogue. It can then damage as children grow to adults. It impacts an organization the same way. The culture is, and I've worked in them, you've worked in them, we've worked with teams where you're not allowed to say anything. You can't go bring this up. There's some managers, directors that we would avoid just because we know what they're going to say, how they're going to overreact to things or underreact, not provide feedback on that. So what's the point of having the conversation? So now you've cut them out of the dialogue and you've removed their opportunity to provide feedback. It weakens the overall the inputs. Everybody needs to have a voice. It needs to be like equally valued voices into the dialogue.
Yeah. Otherwise, I mean, people start blaming each other for things because it ends up being one of these, well, why isn't this done? And why isn't that done? And well, we were going to do it that way, but so-and-so, blah, 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 right? There's always some sort of a conversation of, why isn't this done? Or why didn't it get done correctly? Or why did you change without any conversation? Well, I just wanted to, and I did it. And so said it was okay. And, and so by not having that conversation, everybody kind of back to the herding cats, right? The cats are running all over the place. They're all knocking things off and doing whatever they want to do. And we're not heading down the same path.
Yeah, I like it too. This idea that this fragmented organizational memory of what actually happened on those projects. Well, because your best people that are just not being listened to and aren't being heard, like they leave. And then you have a partial memory of like that project, what happened. So what happens again? Then you repeat all the mistakes all over again. So, that no looking back culture that where you value the speed and let's just get something out there. Those organizations, funny enough, is those kinds of organizations generally are less tolerant about mistakes too.
Yes.
Funny that you could be wrong on both ends of that equation. But it stalls innovation. People aren't willing to try. They're not going to put their necks out there to do something. They're just going to do what they told. And then you've got an organization of ticket takers and no leaders.
Right. Yep. I 100% agree. I think when you allow people to fail, but you give them a path, that's the key, right? It's okay. It's okay to change. It's okay to fail. It's okay to solve a problem. It's okay to have challenges as long as there's a path to resolution and that path is understood and organized.
Most people are not intentionally doing something wrong, or
right.
I mean, look, are there lazy employees? Of course there are. Are there people that are just they're dialing it in? It's like, yeah, there's those kinds of things, but that's not what we're talking about.
Right.
You have a culture where people are able to experiment, to go and try things, and to recognize, hey, that didn't work. Why are we dwelling so much on the failure and not on, oh, right, here's what we learned. Here's what we need to do to move forward. And so, I mean, I've been accused of being overly optimistic on the plans. And it's like, I'm not discounting what went wrong. I'm just like, you have to recognize that and learn from that. I'm already thinking about, here's how we need to adjust on this to continue moving forward. Here's the reality of where we are. What do we need to do next? That's where the focus should be, with, again, not ignoring what happened. And if somebody did something wrong that it's like they intentionally did, or it's serious, or a law or ethics or whatever, I'm not saying you're ignoring that, but the common mistakes are like, we didn't have dual review of this code before we processed, and it failed and delayed the project even more. What did we learn? All right, we need to have this process. We're going to improve our QA process so that quality assurance, we know that it's been reviewed, it's signed off on. Okay, go. So that's the purpose of these discussions.
Yeah. Well, and I also think another thing, and we've talked about this in other episodes, when we talk about like multi-generational or new employees or new members on the team coming in, I think another thing that happens is everybody comes in with their own perspective and they do things. And unless they understand what those lessons learned are, not just we are doomed to repeat them as a team, but as new people come in, if they're not looking, so it's two-sided, right? It's formalizing the approach to having it, but it's also encouraging team members to go find out what has happened so that when they do something, they can grab some of that institutional knowledge in a way that's going to be beneficial to them. And I see people all the time go into places and say, well, I'm just going to start doing my job. And it's like, well, have you bothered to check to see if there's any lessons learned around what you're doing? And I think that is another pitfall is, we talk about overall feedback is formalizing it, having it, and then also encouraging people to go consume that information is the other piece of that.
Yeah. I was thinking about some of the pitfalls of not having this retrospective as part of the culture and part of your formal process. Is that it's easier then to spread the blame around and not understand fully what actually went wrong. So everybody's to blame for the failure, but isn't that funny how usually individual or it's very focused when there's success and not recognition of all of the other roles that went in towards the success. I'm not. Well, to finish my thought here, so that when you have the retrospectives, when they're framed, around a more balanced approach, it's not about blame. It's you focus on the process, you focus on, the things that need to be improved rather than the people. Because if you focus on the people, then people disengage from that. They go silent. It's demoralizing. It's just that they instantly, I'll tell you, they have that experience and they are looking for other jobs, with that one project. The other side of spreading around, even around the wins, like this was frustrating being on the marketing side when salespeople would close business and there was like the ringing the bell and all excited that, hey, this salesperson that closed this deal. I'm like, wait a second. Like, I found that person at the conference, demoed them twice, had multiple emails with, handed it off to the salesperson, and yet the bell's being rung and all the accolades go to the salesperson. I'm not bitter. I just think that, like, hey, there's something broken around that. The fact that when they had technical depth questions and the member of the product team that spent all the time on the phone answering those questions, additional demos, all those kinds of things that went to the closing of that sale, recognizing the attribution of all of these other roles. That's part of what comes out of the retrospective, the postmortem, is that on the win, it's like, look, it's a team win because everybody played a part in this. Let's recognize that. Not just the PM, not just the engineer that came up with the winning piece of code that satisfied the customer's needs. It's all of the other effort around that. So it's not a blame game, it's a share game. Yeah.
Yes, agree with that. I definitely think that if you don't understand what needs to change, then people get really confused really fast, and it's really easy to point fingers.
Or if it becomes a feedback void, it's like the suggestion box in the lunchroom. We all joke about, like, 2 years later, somebody read something, there's a piece of gum stuck to the page that's in there. No, it's that almost as bad as not responding to feedback. I think is worse is responding to it and then not taking action.
Yeah. Well, and think about it this way. When you think about, you provide feedback to anything, right? You put your little note in the feedback box, or you tell somebody how you feel about something, and you kind of feel like it just goes in the trash, right? Then are you going to continue to provide feedback, or are you going to just stop? And I think when we think about it, if feedback isn't viewed and taken and at least, communicated, then, people will stop doing it.
It's interesting to go and look at your project status. Again, having run PMOs, to look at if you actually create a category for issue tracking and identify at what stage they were identified or brought in. Interesting data. I've only done this once where we did that. So we knew that, hey, this is part of the planning process. Issues, risks, whatever it is, we put the stage of where it was identified just so we could start to track data on that. And there's always a tremendous number of suggestions of things to go and do during the postmortem at the end there. And to see that, hey, we're learning throughout the process, but key moments are during this phase and this phase, towards the beginning and it right there at the end. And then providing that transparency of here's what's actually being done. People are being assigned. We're making changes. We're updating process. Where, like, whatever those things are, report back just like you do every other project. I think it's critical.
Yep.
So thinking about this, I mean, we kind of see what we did, that we just spun the pitfalls into a positive experience there.
I know. I'm like, uh-huh.
Well, yeah. I mean, we're as consultants, we're problem solvers. So we jump right into strategies for overcoming the pitfalls. But let's formally strategies now for overcoming this issue.
Yeah. I mean, at the beginning, really the most important thing, I think, is having some sort of a formalized approach, right? We say this on everything we do. It doesn't matter what methodology you use, just have one. But I think if you plan it into your projects to spend the time, and it does kind of drive me nuts. Like, there's a lot of places that kind of force the ceremony. And so then people have like a 1 hour meeting and they check the boxes and they say they did it. And I mean, It's better than not doing it. Yeah. But I mean it, right? Really mean it. Like, really give that opportunity to say, what did we do? What did we learn? Things like that, I think is really important.
You can't forget the entertainment factor of our jobs. Like, I always joke that when I give sessions and I tell a lot of jokes and I just have that kind of casual tone when I'm doing trainings and things. And I often joke that it's like, well, if I'm boring myself, then what is that experience like for everybody else here? Like if I'm, try to keep it fun and light around that. You can do that with a postmortem. You could change up the model and do some different things as long as you're getting through the primary structure, the questions and things that are around that. But there's a number of different ways that you can approach that to make it something that, people are happy to be participating.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's, the most important strategy is to do it, but then it's a matter of making sure that you're focusing on the actual things that happen and you're not pointing fingers at individual people.
Not playing the blame game, but
yes.
Yes. But no, I agree. And then the one other thing again, as I wrapped up with the last one, is that transparency, tracking the action items that come out of that, how you treat that is critical. Always assign ownership, discuss timelines for those changes, depending on what they are, how big that is. And then report back. If like running PMOs, I would report back. We would have as part of our measurements, here's our internal, the operational, the things that we're doing. Here's the projects. Here's the other stuff that's always also moving forward. Here's who's working on them, owns them. Here's our progress against those. Because when people, here's a Buckleyism, that the more that you involve people in the process, the more likely people will follow the process. So that's all about transparency. When they see that, it builds trust. They then start, when people have trust in the process, they're more likely to follow the process. So transparency is a direct tie to trust. Yeah,
I agree. I think it's just a matter of making sure that everybody's on the same page and they all know exactly what you're all working on together.
For best practices, I agree. It should be part of it. It's not hey, do we have the time at the end of the project? It's like, no, we've wrapped up this project. We've delivered on this. You schedule the retrospective. It's non-negotiable. We have these sessions and we treat them seriously. Because if the leadership is not taking it seriously and says, I've had this where I've had leaders tell their people in the partner organizations, peer organizations that should have been there, saying I don't want you going, it's a waste of time. I want you focusing on this other thing. It's like, no, you should have been there for this. Or people, I've had this too, where people showed up regardless of what they're told because they understood the importance of. They wanted to share their thoughts.
Yeah.
But I do like too of having different methods of communicating that info. You should still have an anonymous feedback form. And you learn this lesson when you manage a team. There's some people that you can have a one-on-one, they're happy to bring up and talk, others that have a difficult time. There are some people, if you're sitting in a small group, they're wary of raising their hand and speaking up in front of people. Others that will never raise their hand in a large audience and ask a question. They don't want to ask a stupid question. And I always say the only stupid question is the one that you never ask.
Yeah, I think including everybody makes sense. I think making sure there's often times where there are people who have things to say, but it's just a matter of making sure that they have the opportunity to say it.
There's methods. If you're in a low trust, if there's been problems with psychological safety in an organization around that, there are ways that you can rebuild that. But having anonymous methods, I love the whole idea of having the whiteboard, up there, so that people can go. And I've had people leave requests anonymously on the board, overnight, who wrote, don't know. That's a great question. Let's add that in. And so track those just the same. And then going through and it's funny, we talk about in previous sessions about reviewing on a regular schedule, the process itself, our approach, the methodology.
Yep.
And this is something similar on a quarterly, semi-annual basis. Go back and look at the results, the output of all of your postmortems and review, is this process delivering what we want to see? Are we seeing that we're getting more anonymous feedback than there in time? What can we do to change that? How can we build more trust so that people are more vocal early on? Because postmortem's like any other problem. The earlier you can identify an issue, the less costly it is to solve that issue.
Yes.
All right. So finally, calls to action to close out this topic. If you're a manager, what's your advice for a manager? What's the call to action? What do they need to go and do?
I think, as a leader in general, and it doesn't matter what you're managing, managers, leaders, I think it's really, we talk about cultural change. So I get to talk about the cultural change stuff. I think it's really important to make sure that you express the importance of retrospectives, lessons learned, postmortems, whatever you want to call it. It's that continuous improvement kind of methodology and culture. I think as a leader and manager, you need to buy into it. You need to make sure that you're doing it, and you need to make time for it, right? And then make sure that everybody understands the value in it, so that you will continue to do that and you'll continue to get the ROI out of doing it.
Can I add to that by saying that you also need to, and this is a hard thing to do, but to listen without judgment for those executives. That's a key aspect of this. That may be why people are so silent in those sessions, because they feel like someone's going to jump down their throat right there, argue with them on that. You want this to be, right? My feeling is you want this to be more of a information collection activity to talk about, what can we do to resolve this, not go and try and solve all the problems in their entirety right there during that hour or whatever it is.
Yeah. In fact, I see even very healthy cultures, right, that are not toxic. They're good people. They're good leaders. People feel safe. Even in those cultures, sometimes I see when there's execs in the room, other people will not speak up as loudly. They will not provide feedback. And so I think, as an upper level leader, either one of two things. You either need to recognize that sometimes you need to leave the room to let that conversation happen. And sometimes you need to give people permission to let that conversation happen. But I think depending on what your level of leadership is, you need to do it, and you need to recognize the role that you play in it. And you need to make sure that you're providing the breathing room for that to happen.
I just need to give you some props, Sharon. I like your technique of leaving the room and watching the whole thing through a two-way mirror and taking copious notes of whose careers you're going to end.
Now, let's not go down a dark path, but I will tell you that the recap feature on Teams has definitely made my life easier.
No, it's it. Yeah, I watch too many sci-fi movies, detective movies around the two-way mirror approach to that. No, but it's I knew a person who was actually on a TV show, and we'll get into the details around this, but that commented on having a separation between like the leader and then the project level, the participants, the peers out there, and removing herself from those discussions, recognizing that people are not going to be free and open to have this full discussion while I'm in the room. And I didn't think of it that way, because I don't have a problem with it either way. I'm not a respecter of title. I've said stuff in with a president or a vice president in the room, and I've told the CEO that his ideas were stupid because they were, and those kinds of things.
But I don't think all people feel comfortable to speak at a
certain
level.
They do not. So read the room around that. But yeah, definitely as a leader, as a manager, the other advice would be to make sure that, that this is part of your practices. It's not just a one-off, that it really is something that you're repeating, and that you're learning from and adjusting that model to figure out what works.
Exactly.
Any other calls to action on that? Anything else you think of? Advice that you would give?
I mean, we always just say do it, but I think a lot of people don't value it as much as they should. And I just think you should, do it, embrace it. Make sure you're doing it because you want to do it, not just because you're checking a box.
Yeah. Boy, we should copyright that just do it. That's great advice.
Just do it. Yeah.
Surprised nobody's ever come up with it. So, well, that's it for this week's episode. Thank you for watching. Please be sure to follow us out on YouTube. And of course, the recording will be available. We're going to do a lot of other stuff, lots more social promotion. You'll start seeing all the video shorts and more content coming, newsletter and trainings and lots of stuff that's happening. So thank you for following us. Of course, we'll start with, reaching out through this medium, through the videos. So if you'd like to get more involved and do more and learn more, please let us know.
We'll see you next time.